What is up? Welcome to this week's episode of the Vanflip podcast brought to you by Lambgoat. Today, I am sitting with Yegor from the Connecticut melodic doom / death metal band Fires in the Distance. Welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing today?
Good, man. Glad to be here.
I can't believe I said buddy. That is like the lamest thing. I've never done that on this podcast. But anyway, yeah, it's
We've
been
called worse.
yeah, it's been a long back and forth between you guys or you and I. I know you guys stopped by here a couple months ago, and you were playing with Don of I mess this name up all the time. Osoburos.
Ouroboros.
What was it?
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros. Yeah. Okay, I got it. I made the R and S. So yeah, that was a great show that you guys played down here in Jacksonville. And I was pretty excited about catching that one. But I'm also excited about getting this podcast finally after 2 months of back and forth on the whack, so to speak.
It took a little bit of more time than I expected, but as soon as we got back from the tour, I was also like applying to new jobs, and it's a little hectic. And I just started a new gig too, so it's been, my schedule's been a little wonky, but we're finally here, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
It's not just you. It was also me. I'm busy on my end, and we're only emailing back and forth, and I get, I don't know, 1,000 emails a day. So
Yeah,
it's
I
good.
bet.
It's good that I can catch them every now and then. But that being said, you guys had a great year. It seemed. You had your sophomore album come out. "Air Not Meant for Us," I believe, is the title of it. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
You also had an instrumental of that record coming out, or that came out earlier this year too, and I want to get into that as to like why you did that. But yeah, you guys, was this your second prosthetic record
Yeah,
or okay, yeah. So you guys had your debut in 2020. Um,
right.
so what was the main difference between that original your debut record with Fires? Because it seemed like you guys kind of hit the next level as far as like that album, because like when you guys shared your Spotify Wrapped stats, which obviously is not like the end all be all as to like rank a hierarchy of bands or popularity or anything like that, but it was quite interesting. You guys had like 700,000 streams, but you also like, I think that was what was pretty interesting was you guys had like 170 countries or something like that, that kind of, or 140, sorry, 140 countries that you guys kind of reached through that through Spotify. So what made it like much more, I don't want to say palatable, but much more accessible for other people?
The first one was definitely much more experimental. Um, it was primarily music that I wrote when I stepped away from my last like just straight up melodic death metal band, and I was venturing into new territory that was, somebody somewhere down the line called us doom at one point. I don't really see it that way. I think it's just a slower mellow death. Um,
I can see the
I mean, I
confusion. I can see the little bit of
yeah,
confusion. There's like a little hints of it, but like you said, it is just like a slower melodic death metal sound too.
I mean, it's definitely very melancholy, but I don't think it's like straight up doom band. Um, but yeah, the first one was just like me kind of exploring new territory and seeing what I can do with like different soundscapes as opposed to, you know, just really straightforward like dark tranquility-ish mellow death. And then this one that came out earlier this year was just more refined. I had more time to really think it through. I had some other people on my team that I was working with as far as orchestrations, and really bringing like real instruments into it. Like um, I worked with Randy Slaw, who recorded live cellos and live
Mm.
violins and violas and things like that, and he played some of the piano parts. He wrote parts of the album as well. So, um, it was a much more concentrated and thought out effort where I kind of knew, like, I had a better idea of what I was doing with it. So,
Hmm. I think also it gets a little bit of the doom uh, name tag too because you have like 10-minute, 7-minute long songs that are kind of slow and
Yeah.
drawn out, which is not a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, it's easily to be confused. You know what I mean? Like, that seems to
It
be.
is and it's not though. You know what I
You're
mean?
not
Like
like a
I
drony doom band. That's what I should say. It's not like a drony kind of like doom, like traditional, band where it's just like gutturals with long, drawn out, like strumming and stuff like that. You guys definitely are like, doing the whole death metal thing too. You guys have that sound. You have some keys and synths, which you also kind of do in the band on top of the guitar work that you do. But it does kind of get like you said, a melancholy vibe with the long songs. So kind of can seem like a little bit doomy,
I
but it's
view the
not.
lengthy songs as more of like a proggy element than
Mm-hmm.
a doom element. Like, and I try not to limit much. It is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. Not bad necessarily, but it does make things difficult. Like coming up with a live set is not really easy because we have songs ranging from 10 minutes to 8 minutes, and trying to like figure out which pieces we can play without cutting anything out in uh 30 or half an hour to
Right.
45 minutes perfectly is kind of like a process in and of itself, like just sitting down figuring out, okay, like we're 30 seconds between these two songs, otherwise we're going to run late. So it's
So do you have to like
uh,
pick? I mean, with that being said, do you have songs that you cut a little bit out of? Like, do you guys like maybe like longer intro or
yeah.
outro or parts? But do you also like have to? Because again, I don't know if every song that you guys have on this record or your previous record is tuned to the same key, or if you're down tuned or standard or whatever. Does that limit you too, as well as like because you have in between, you have small bits of in between songs. Do you have like, you're like, okay, well, I got to grab this other guitar,
Right,
or you
yeah.
know what I mean?
No, that definitely factors in. The the first album was on 6 strings. The second one was on 7 strings. It's essentially the same tuning. Uh, I mean, the 6 strings was in drop B, and the sevens was in drop F sharp. So it's basically like C sharp all the way to the until the top string. So it's you can make it work. It's just if we were playing songs off the first one. But the thing is, like, sometimes we do have to cut some intros or kind of piece them together on our own end. When putting the backing tracks together for Jordan, because he's in charge of all that with his laptop, by the drums. So we're all kind of following him. Sometimes we have to like cut out open space parts,
Mm.
which just to save time and just just plan on how to go into the next song, just to, a little bit faster so we're not running late. But I mean, we kind of have it down to a science at this point, but sometimes it's definitely we'd like to play certain songs live, but there's certain songs which you can't really omit because they're like establishers.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's the particular like idiopathic despair is something will always close with, and especially for this past tour, like Harbinger's the first song
Mm-hmm.
on this new album. It's an opener. Like you can't really put them in different spots. They just don't belong there. That's why they're arranged the way they are on the record.
And
So
that's 20 minutes of the whole damn set right there.
yeah, unfortunately, and then you can't talk. I mean, not that I like a lot of chatter in between, but it's just like
You can't connect with
sometimes you
with
really
the
have to
audience.
plan it
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah. So
That
so
is.
that's the downside to it. The upside to it is like I don't like to cut anything. Um, I don't really like. There's definitely some parts in these songs that I think could be a little bit shorter, and then some that seem long, but when I cut them out, it just doesn't feel complete. So like when we were getting these vinyls together, we definitely ran into an issue where like one of the songs was a little bit too long, and there was a suggestion thrown around to like cut a minute or two out of it, and I just couldn't do that
Mm.
because it just didn't it just didn't feel right. So like we found a solution like at the end of the day, but you know uh, just speaking to like the length of some of these tracks, I mean, it's really difficult to cut out some of the parts because I feel like they're there for a reason. So And I know it might bore some people, like who wants to listen to a 10-minute song sometimes. But a lot of people have a short attention span. I get that,
That's
but
true. But
I'm not gonna structure this music to cater to anybody. So
um, I spent um, I spent a bit of the morning listening to it. Oh, let me put it on here so it's not blurry. Yeah, I got the CD. I got the CD at the show.
I
When
thought
you
that
got
was the parental advisory version.
no, no. Uh, but yeah, I've been spending some more time with and I forgot that they were long songs. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like I'm listening to a 10-minute long song, which is probably a good thing for the listener. But there's so much involved in like the layering, the guitar work, the synth work, and there's a lot that adds to each track that makes you feel like you're just along for the ride for the most part, and not really like it's not a daunting task, right? So like
Right. Yeah.
you got like 6 songs on this record, and I'm sure the run time is something like 50 minutes or whatever, or around that time.
It's
You know what I mean?
51, pretty
Yeah.
close.
So it doesn't feel like you're out to complete this whole big giant like 1,000-page book. You know what I mean? Like it goes through very quickly. And that's something that's pretty awesome. You guys also like released an instrumental version of that record later in the
Yeah.
year, like in October. What was the idea behind that? And is that something that you guys like what Prosthetic suggest, or you guys just felt like, hey, we should just do this on a
No, we did that with the first one as well. And
mm,
the reason I like to do that is because originally this project was meant to be instrumental. I never wanted
okay.
vocals on it. It's just something that came up later. And like the vocals that we have with Christian, like they fit. I try to keep them pretty scarce throughout the songs, but not too scarce. But at the end of the day, like after both of these releases, we got messages from people asking if we had clean versions of these songs because there's people that like both. There's people that are not into the harsh death metal growls and stuff like that, and just would like to hear the music. So um, we kind of decided that why not just release a clean version digitally a little bit later in the year, and we'll probably do that with every album going forward too, because people definitely request both. So why not just give it to them?
Yeah, I mean that is an interesting way to get the music out there too. People can do karaoke to it if they would like to. Uh,
Sure.
did
And it's not like the instrumental stuff is not anything we'll ever print vinyl for or anything like that. It's just like a at a much cheaper cost on a digital platform on like Bandcamp or something like that.
Yeah,
So
it's just out there for whomever would like to have it. I get that.
yeah.
So was Craig just? I know Craig does the vocals, but is that something like you just said you didn't imagine it having vocals in this project when it started? Is that something that just kind of happened throughout like writing the first record or writing the first couple songs? Like you guys were like, "Hey, Craig's got some good death metal vocals. We should use that
Well, Craig
sparingly
and
throughout it."
Christian both. Craig does the backup vocals and bass. Christian does the front
Mm,
vocals. And Christian was the first guy I invited to play with me when I was working some of the first album out. Him and I have always been in different bands growing up, and we never really worked together. Um, and then he was at a point in his life where he wasn't really working on any specific projects, and I mean, he always had a really good death metal voice. So, you know, when we were working through some of the guitar parts, we were just kind of giving it some thought, and like, if we have that tool with us, why not use it? Um, there's no reason to let it go to waste when, you have somebody that actually has like, a decent, not stock death metal sound. So it was just another, you know, something else that we could layer into um, the music and just, give it a little bit more power in some aspects. So
is that why it's kind of like, well, and again, it may feel sporadic or sparing, being used sparingly throughout the tracks, but again, these are longer tracks, like 10-minute long songs sometimes. So, but is that kind of like a conscious effort to not really have a lot of vocals in each song, and you just kind of like let the
yeah,
music do its thing?
yeah, for sure. Because I feel like I'm very conscientious of using every element just only as much as it needs to be used.
Mm.
Like there's definitely a lot of bands that I hear that either overuse blast beats or overuse vocals, and it kind of like there's good parts to them, but that element just laid on so thick, whichever one it may be, just kind of kills it for me. So I try not to like do too much of one thing, like
Mm.
not do like too much of a good thing. So um plus I don't know. I personally like focusing on the instrumental aspects of things myself, but I definitely think that the vocals add a good element to this stuff, and also having Craig do backup vocals as well is really cool because he has a different range. He's very good with the higher um, uh, elements with the growling. He also has a pretty sick low too, but Christian has a good mid range with his growls, so they balance each other out pretty well.
And
And I
what?
always thought it's cool to have like multiple people sing on stage.
Of course, yeah. It definitely sharing the load, but also like you said, getting the other dynamics out there because people have different styles and different vocal ranges and everything like that. Um, when you started this off, when you started the whole Fires project off, because you were in Archaic, Des-
Decapitator.
yeah, okay, Decapitator. Before that, was this kind of like just like a solo kind of gig project that you were just like noodling around in your house, and then like
Yeah,
it kind of
I was
branched out?
writing a song for Archaic. Actually, it was the one that ended up being Chained to the Earth, but it was too slow for that band, and it just like it wouldn't have worked. But I enjoyed it, and I set it aside, and then a few months down the road, I decided to just explore it a little bit further and do something completely different from Archaic, and it just kind of grew to what it did. It wasn't at first like we would never wanted to play live shows. We were just doing it for ourselves, and it was fun. But then when we got into a rehearsal space and we ran the keys through the PA, it really filled out the room so much that like it only took like one practice to realize that we really should bring this to a live stage because it's really captivating. Like it creates like a really dense atmosphere. Um, so it just kind of grew from there, but initially it was never planned out to be what it is.
Hmm. And so that being said, what's it been like now? 5 6 years after, and this, the latest album that you put out this last year has really started to get your band out there and your name out there and stuff like that. I mean, the album's been on a lot of top album lists for the year. We haven't dropped our album list yet, but at this time, but by the time this is out, it probably will be out. So check that out. But
Of course, yeah.
you know, you were on Decibel's metal album list, and that's kind of like a very coveted list. And we're pretty good friends with those guys, so I kind of agree with that being on there. But like, you know, as a project that you didn't really think was even going to be played live at first, and this that, or the other, and remind me if your previous band. I don't think your previous band was signed, right? It was just like a
No.
okay. So yeah, with that other aspect added to it, like now you've got a signed band, or not that it's signed band, but you have signed records. You have all this, you know, accolades are kind of like starting to fucking come through the pipeline. How does it feel, after being an artist for so long that you're kind of now starting to get some kind of notoriety and you can find, ride the wave, so to speak?
It's kind of interesting. Like it's for me, it's very unexpected. I try to like not read into all that stuff too much. I just hope that whatever I'm writing resonates with somebody, and I'm really like sometimes I guess I feel a little bit surprised, but at the same time, it's really touching to meet people on the road and on tour and stuff that pull you aside and say like there's certain parts of your music and like your lyrics and whatever and just some certain melodies that really hit a really strong note with me because that's all I really want. So
To connect,
like the
yeah.
fact that I achieved that means a lot more to me than anything else. But it's also funny because with Archaic Decapitator, like that band was something that me and Craig and our first drummer Kyle started when we were like 18, 19, 20 years old, and we grinded for so long, like trying to break through. And we went through different like genre like changes and stuff. It started off as like a techie, just like really grimy death metal thing, and just really atrocious because we didn't know what we were doing back then. And then it transitioned to more of a mellow death thing. And then at the end of the day, something that I didn't even expect too many people to hear ends up taking off. So it's a strange paradox.
Yeah, that's how it works, right? Like the thing you're not really
Yeah.
thinking about just catches on. But I mean, it's very interesting. Like, the name, I remember, God, because I took over Lambgoat like July. So I started posting the news July of last year, 2022. Yeah, 2022. So I remember like seeing the name come across, and it just for some reason stuck with me, and then I started listening to the music, and so on and so forth. And next thing you know, I'm coming to the shows that you guys are. Well, I don't know if you like tour that often, because I know other guys in your bands have daytime full gigs and jobs and stuff like that. So I don't necessarily know like
Yeah,
how
we all
often.
do, man. It's
Yeah.
like it's really tough to do both. I remember talking to Andy from Black Crown Initiate years ago, and he pretty much said like you got to pick one or the other down the road. You can't do both.
Yeah, it's true.
Uh,
And it kind of sounds like you guys may be having that conversation maybe in the next, album cycle or whatnot, whenever that may
oh,
be, obviously. But
we've been having that conversation. It's really tough. We're doing our best to find some kind of middle ground. Um, but that's a really deep and heavy topic that I'll probably be able to illuminate a little bit like further down the road, maybe next year.
yeah,
But right now, it's definitely a heavy topic of conversation in the band because
I'm sure not
we're
everybody
all
can.
aware that music doesn't pay the bills,
That's
and
true. Yeah, and I'm sure that to have certain members of the band like give up their day jobs, they would have to sacrifice quite a bit, because
yeah,
it is it's not always for sure the paycheck in the metal world, especially in the more smaller niche metal worlds where fires live and stuff like that. But does so it hinders you a bit currently for the last couple of years in like taking on tour packages or being added to tours or anything like that. So like how often have you guys been able to? Because I know you guys did come here in October but I think that was like a 2 week or a week and a half tour for you guys.
yeah, and that was like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks is something that's definitely possible. But for some of us, that's an entire year's vacation time.
Yeah.
I was kind of lucky, like before we left for that tour, I was leaving my previous job. So when we came back, I knew that I was gonna start applying to new gigs and stuff like that. So I had more kind of free time. But Jordan was getting a new job too. He just moved to Boston. So um, and then Craig is a financial planner. Like he has his own office. He can't leave his clients for too long either. But
Yeah.
and Christian he has his own business. He does flooring. Um, I used to work at a hospital. Right now, I just got a new job at a dialysis clinic. I'm a nurse there. So it's not really jobs that you can just leave and come back to. Can't really go on 3 month tours and stuff like that. So we have to be really selective with what we are able to do, and just make sure we plan it out really carefully so we get you know the most really out of
Hmm.
whatever shows we can put on. So
Do you guys get any kind of offers for like European or international tours? Because again, you guys did hit like at least on Spotify it shows you have like 140 countries. You know what I mean? That listen at some point to the album or the band. So I'm sure you
yeah,
get those offers, but you can't take those offers. You know what I mean?
there's been a couple that came up that we had to that we just couldn't work out, and there was like two or three, and some of them were a real bummer because they were with bands that were hugely influential for me, but it just was not in the cards. And
Mm.
it's sometimes you have to make that difficult choice, even though that is like I'm never gonna stop writing music, and regardless of where it takes me or it takes this band, like I'm always gonna keep doing it. But I also have to, you know, pay my bills too. So it's a difficult choice that we have to make, but
Yeah. At
it
least
is
it,
what it is.
At least, yeah, and at least in the age of the internet, there's you have the ability to kind of like maybe not tour so frequently, but people can still access you in some way, whether it's like social media, Spotify,
Yeah.
Apple Music, or even like if you guys do some kind of like live stream stuff for fans or whatever, not like a show, but maybe like
And
interactive type
we've
thing.
done that. We've done that before too. Like during COVID, we did a live stream, and then we recorded the entire first album in Telefunken here in Connecticut. It was a big open studio. Um, and we'll do that as much. I remember Lepers did the same thing. A lot, like Black Dahlia Murder did the same thing. A lot
Hmm.
of bands were doing that during COVID too. So we'll figure some things out. Like that, we're trying to figure out a middle ground, and see if we can actually find one. But I know it's a really elusive thing. And not a lot of bands are able to do it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Just like to be able to go out on tours like once a year for maybe like 3 4 weeks, or just like do festivals exclusively or something. That's like also not very easy to
Right.
break into as well. Um,
I can kind of see you guys doing that though. But again, the slots, the performance slots or timing that you get on a festival isn't necessarily like long. Some of them are 25 minutes, 20
yeah,
minutes. So you go up there and rip two songs, and then you're done, you're done for the day.
yeah, but it's still fun. You know what I
Of
mean? It's
course.
still revitalizing. It makes you feel like you're still in it, and makes you feel like it's still worth it. For the live aspect of things. And if we could transition into being like a festival band, I totally would, but it's not really easy to break into
Hmm.
um that festival club, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of labels that have their own monopolies on certain things, and
Oh yeah.
it's a lot of bureaucracy.
Yeah, I
So
would, oh, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of money flowing around those things, so I know they're probably pretty stingy and picky as far as like who's involved and who gets to come along for the trip. Would you prefer like U.S. based festivals or international festivals? Because I would
no,
see you like,
absolutely international. I would
yeah, I would
love to play
see.
abroad.
I
I mean,
I could see that.
we're going to the well, the plan is right now we're going to be at UK Desert Fest in May.
Nice.
um, and we're trying to get a couple of adjacent dates there with some people, because um,
Make it
if
worthwhile.
if we're flying across the pond, might as well do a couple more
Of
gigs and
course.
make like take our vacation time and maybe do like a week's worth of shows there. But yeah, no, I would love to play like anywhere. Canada has been really cool. Montreal has been one of our favorite cities to play. US is dope too, but like I definitely want to travel and play to as many different crowds as I can. So
Yeah, when I
that's
was
why
in
we don't really play Connecticut very often. We try to go to places we've never been to before. And sometimes you take a chance, and sometimes, it's not the best result. And sometimes it's a fantastic result. So,
yeah.
but I love like playing in front of new people as much as I can.
So what is the Connecticut scene like up there for like bands within the death metal and like a melodic metal genres? Like because I whenever I think of like New England or whatever, I don't necessarily think of metal. I think of a lot of like hardcore because that's
Yeah.
where a lot of that stuff came
Yeah.
from.
That's what everybody hate breed, all that shit.
Yeah. So what's it like up there for you guys? Being in like a melodic death metal band.
Um, we only really play like once a year, and we put on gigs with some mostly folks we know, either in the tri-state area or here in Connecticut, and it's more of like something we do for ourselves. I know there's this state has like Shadow of Intent, which is pretty
Mm-hmm.
big. There's another band that's on Century Media, a death metal band, but I forget their name. I actually saw them um, at our local venue, the Webster, a couple of months ago. But um, I believe we had like Fate's Warning from Hartford too. It's going back. I might be wrong, but yeah, I mean it's a very small state. I don't. really go to hardcore shows or
Mm.
anything like that, but I'm sure that scene is still alive and kicking here. And I don't really make it out to as many gigs as I'd like to, whether it be local or international. I just like the first show I went to in probably a year and a half was Catatonia a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I missed
Um,
that. They're playing tomorrow in Orlando, and that was an album that I you know posted again. That was like one of the first singles I might have posted in the first couple of months or whatever of taking over the news, so to speak. And God, that song just like infected my brain and just would not
yeah,
stop playing. And so like oddly enough, I'm not even into that kind of music that much, but I've ripped the shit out of that CD all year long, and I was excited to see they're playing Orlando tomorrow, but I got booked on another gig in West Palm Beach, so I'm like, fuck, I can't go to the show. It's like the only Florida date or something like that, and I was like, well, fuck it, whatever. But
it
it is
was
what it
cool,
is.
man. They had this band called SOM opening for them. I believe it's part of the tour package, which really for me stole the show. They were really, really cool. Um, and Catatonia is always great. I mean, they've changed their sound over the years for sure. But I've enjoyed pretty much all the records they put out in the last like 15 years, even
Yeah.
before that.
I mean, they're like older looking via the pictures. I don't know exactly their age, but it would make sense, that they've kind of like not nerfed their sound, but made it more palatable for other people. And now their audience is probably wider and grander. But
Yeah, yeah.
again, they're playing
I
all the
mean,
time. They're playing the
they
world all the
grow,
time.
they evolve, and half of those guys are in Bloodbath. So
They have other
the
outlets.
singer is the bassist, and then their guitar player is also in Bloodbath. But Bloodbath is like at least my favorite record was with Peter Tagrin doing vocals. The Nightmares Made Flesh, I think, is one of my favorite death metal albums of all time. I think they had the perfect lineup on that album, and the perfect songs too. With Dan Swano of Edge of Sanity was playing guitar, and
Hmm.
his solos and leads were incredible. And Peter, I think Peter is my favorite vocalist of all time, like in the death metal world for sure.
Awesome,
So
awesome. Um, how did you get in to death metal and like heavy metal in
that's a funny
general?
story. That's a really funny story.
Especially in like the
Because
hardcore world, you know what I mean? Like you're in like the hardcore capital of that, at that time. I would
I,
assume you're
even
on the same
even
age.
if I mean, we're in the hardcore capital, but I've never enjoyed hardcore music.
I can see that.
But
I mean,
it's
not you personally, but I can see why it's not palatable for people. I understand completely.
yeah. Um, how I got it's weird. I grew up in Moscow until I was 10 years old. We moved to the States in the early 90s. And over there, at the time, at least in the early 90s, the biggest music was either like folky or like goth rock or like electronic music. So like one of the first bands I really got into was like early 90s Prodigy, like
Hell yeah.
Music for the Jilted Generation album
Hell
was
yeah.
like I had it on cassette, I had it on CD. I was used to listen to it in my Walkman all the time. And still to this day, I think it's a phenomenal record. Um, so I started out with that, and also around the time we moved to the States, the first Mortal Kombat movie came out, and they had. It's funny, I tell the story all the time. I bought or my brother rather bought the soundtrack on a cassette at like a Subway kiosk, and I remember listening to it, and Napalm Death's "Twist the Knife" was on it, and that was the first song I remember hearing that made me like go like, what the fuck is this? Like,
Yeah.
I love it. I didn't even know I would love it, but
Yeah.
I did,
Yeah.
and that's like what started me down the path of like heavier music was that Napalm Death song.
Well, at least you gotta, I mean, that's not a bad band to get introduced to heavy, crazy, wild shit. Yeah, especially for a
Yeah,
youngster at that time.
I still
Yeah,
think Barney has one of the coolest vocals ever.
for sure. And like some people, again, that's a band that's been around for fucking decades, and they've not overly changed their sound or whatever. But I can't tell. Dude, Throws, isn't that the album with the?
Yeah, yeah,
That album is so
it's
fucking good, dude.
it's
And
sick, dude. It's Zero Gravitas Chamber. I listen to that shit all the time. It's
yeah,
disgusting.
and I know people were like not super fond of it, but I was like, dude, I would
I don't
run.
care.
I would.
I don't care what people say. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would put that on during like my runs, and I would just run for the entire album, throughout
Yeah.
my town or whatever. And it was just like I would constantly go back to it for that reason, and it just became like such a badass fucking album. And I couldn't see where people were like hating on it, but then if I would remind myself of like 80s Napalm Death and
Yeah.
90s Napalm Death. I was like, oh
Fucking
yeah,
people hate. They'll find reasons to hate absolutely nothing nowadays. And like I still love like older Napalm too, like Breathe to Breathe and Greed Killing, like Words from the Exit Wound. Like I have all of their albums, and they. It's interesting. That's a band that I never imagined I would enjoy with like better production, but their production's gotten
exactly.
continuously like tighter over the years, and I really enjoy that too.
Yeah.
So
And I think it really, and again, I hate bringing up Throws again, but goddamn, that I think the production on that album and the mixing on that album is so fucking good. And like that, I think my biggest argument with like the death metal crowd, so to speak, would be in the death metal adjacent crowd, would be the production stuff. Like people are very snobby about metal production sometimes, and like
yeah,
thrash kind of falls under that too, where like a lot of the early thrash and the early death metal sounds like that because that's it wasn't they weren't trying to sound like that as far as the production goes. That's just all they were limited to, or the people that were recording them, may not have been like the most inept at recording death metal. So it sounds very kind of like, I don't want to say flat, but sounds like you recorded it in like a fucking tin trash can. You know what I mean? And like it's
yeah.
very
It's very organic and raw. You
right.
know.
But
Yeah.
there's no bass. You can't hear like a lot of low end or anything like that. But that was one of the things on that Napalm Death album. I was like, holy fuck, you can hear so much more, and it's
Yeah.
just way more
It's so
full.
good.
You know what I mean? But I could totally see like this probably doesn't go over well with a lot of the original Napalm Death fans.
Yeah, but I mean, there's an argument for like production that's way too tight that makes a band sound mechanical,
Yeah,
and there's you know an argument to bands like, for example, like Spawn of Possession has always had a very organic sound to them where it's not overproduced at all, and you could hear everything. Like I think Spawn of Possession for sure is like one of the pinnacles of like technical music. Um, and they didn't like, for example, if you, I'm not trying to compare the two, but you listen to like Zenith Passage or something like that, who has extremely tight production. It's
yeah,
like tuned to the finest little degree. But they also write really cool riffs, so I don't mind that. But there's some bands that do it way, like they take it way too far, where it just sounds a little plastic,
yeah.
you
Agreed.
know. So
I'm okay with it. I'm not okay with it sounding plasticky, but like I'm okay with it sounding like it was recorded in a tin can if it's like a 1981 recording or something like that. But
yeah.
if it's like a 2021 recording and you're trying to like, have that same sound, it's just like why? Because when
Well,
bands
retro is fucking in,
I
man. Like,
know, yeah, nostalgia and retroism is all great, but I mean, like when I'm hearing a band live, it's not going to sound like there's going to be low end.
yeah,
There's going to be low end elements and stuff like that, so it's going to sound different than it would if I'm listening to it on record or CD, right? So that's the thing. Like I was always like, I don't get why people shit on like better production in metal and stuff like that, but it's just like it's a constant back and forth, obviously, with the crowd. So I for
yeah,
one am in support of it. The better it can sound, the better it sounds like through Spotify, through record, through CD. If it sounds more like I'm gonna hear them live, I'm so more
yeah.
apt to see them live because I'll listen to that record more.
As long as they can replicate it
Right,
live,
right, 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 right.
because
Yeah,
some bands, rely on that tight production a little too much, and then when it comes to actually play it in person, it's like, is this even the same people?
yeah. You're correct on that. You're correct. Yeah, movie soundtracks, man. I was talking about that literally yesterday with my partner here at Lambgoat, and we were talking about because I don't know if you again are a fan of hardcore music, but Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine was previously in a hardcore band called Inside Out, and they're kind of like teasing a reunion or whatever for next year. And so we were talking about Rage Against the Machine, and they were in, and I just recently saw the Godzilla movie, so we just kind of like smashed the two conversations together, and we started talking about the Godzilla movie that came out in the late '90s, early 2000s that had Jimmy Page and Puff Daddy redo like Kashmir or whatever, and that album, we were just talking about like how soundtracks were so good back in the day, like especially for like
Yeah.
heavy music, not just, I think heavy music in that time frame in the late 90s 2000s really shined like with the Resident Evil soundtracks, the End of Day soundtrack, and all these other big movie soundtracks, and a lot of people got introduced to like whether it's metal, new metal, heavy metal or whatever. Like, again, you had Napalm Death from the Mortal Kombat movie. So it's like, it's really sad that we don't have that as much anymore, but it was cool
Yeah,
for
I
that time
did. I don't
period.
know about you, but I've definitely focused. I mean, I've noticed in the last, I could say 20 years, maybe more, that the um, music in general, whether it's in movies or video games or anything like that, it's definitely taken a back seat, and that's a really big shame because music was such an essential component for like a lot of films and a lot of like dope games that I remember
Yeah.
from the 90s and 2000s. Like that's what made me really remember those times, and now music's like in film. It just feels like more of a supplement than anything else. Like it's there because it has to be, and I think that's a big bummer because it's like you remember movies like Gladiator, for example. Like the
Hmm.
score on that was just like monumental. Like that's what
Oh yeah, yeah.
made people. I feel like it's a big reason why people remember that movie so much because it was so moving during those like also very moving scenes as well. So,
Right.
but
But it paired
yeah,
together, it takes it to another level. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah,
But again, I don't know, like, I think certain genres like new metal very much benefited from that time frame of just being, you know, they were in like the movies they were in too, those songs were in were just connecting with like a younger audience.
yeah. But they also fit in with those types of movies
Right,
too. Like
exactly.
I Know What You Did Last Summer. That's a perfect new metal, you movie almost. Like shit
Wow.
like
Yeah,
that.
you're
Those
you're
go
not
hand
wrong.
in
You're not
hand.
wrong, but yeah. Yeah. And again, I remember some of those movies only because of the soundtrack. So that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, that's kind of the whole thing too. Maybe one day we'll get back to that. I mean, certain video games, I would say, like, still kind of use music as a not a focal point, but as like a very much part of the game. Like when I would play, and this could all, I haven't played these games in forever, but like when I would play Madden on Xbox in like the mid 2010s, there were a lot of bands like, I think Bullet for My Valentine was on there, and there was some other kind of like metal bands that were on there. And I remember thinking, I'm starting to like memorize these other songs that I don't want to memorize. Not Bullet for My Valentine,
Yeah.
but they had other artists and other genres on there. And like here I am just going like, so I know that people are being introduced to like bands that I'm familiar with at that time, and they're thinking the same thing. Like, oh no, I'm falling into like Bullet for My Valentine fan base. So some bands, I mean, some gaming companies do it right, and obviously you have
But I
like
mean, dude, like,
Guitar Hero
do
and Rock Band,
movies
but
nowadays even use like bands in their soundtracks anymore? I don't know. I mean, I haven't really looked into
yeah,
it, but I haven't really noticed any like songs per se. It's always like an orchestral little score or something, you know.
yeah. I guess I don't
Whereas,
know. I don't know. I don't. Movies these days kind of suck. I'm just gonna.
oh, I mean, they're all remakes. It's like
Yeah, that too.
it's very rare to find an original film.
I will say this:
So,
the new Godzilla movie, thoroughly impressed. I went in with the worst mindset. Like I was like, I don't even fucking like Godzilla movies. But my partner, my girl, big horror movie. Obviously, girls are always horror movie fans, but she's also big into like Creature from the Black Lagoon, and
yeah.
Godzilla was like big for her. So she really wanted to see it, and she was super excited. So we went, and I was like, okay, this is all subtitles, it's all in Japanese, but damn, even though Godzilla looked cheesy, in my head I was like, he's supposed to look cheesy. Like it,
Right, yeah,
this is
yeah.
so much like a nod back into like the old, man in the suit vibe, and it was thoroughly impressed, and I would see it again. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, I kind of had the same like a similar mindset going to see the new Evil Dead. Because
uh,
I mean I'm huge into like horror myself and stuff. And I remember when the remake first came out, I think in the 2010s or something like that. Initially I was really pissed off because I'm like, big into the originals, but now I enjoy it. And I thought the new Evil Dead was really cool too. I know a lot of people rip on that movie, but I thought it was a cool idea.
I do have to go revisit that. I've only seen Evil Dead 1 and 2. Then I was like, I get it. It's just not, it's like a humorous horror movie and it's not for me. But that was also way back in the day. So I have to revisit a lot of things because I was too high and mighty in my younger days, you know?
Oh yeah.
Too high and mighty. There's a lot of bands I never even checked out just based on like what the band photo or the
Oh,
title of the
I
band
suffer
was.
from the same affliction with that, and I'm sure I missed a lot of really good music just
Yeah.
seeing the artwork and being like, nah.
So my question, like you came from Russia or Moscow. So like,
Yeah,
do you have any siblings, like an older sibling, younger sibling?
I have one brother, but he lives here in Jersey.
Okay.
I don't really have much family left back there.
No, I
Um,
mean like, but here, like, you had someone because I'm always curious as to how people find themselves in the heavy music world, and obviously you had that soundtrack, but like finding new bands after finding Napalm Death through that soundtrack, like how did you go about it? Did you have a friend base or someone in your family that would show you others,
no, no,
bands?
no, no. My brother is not. He lives in a whole different world. I don't even know if he likes music per se, but like just going through school, I was very young. Like middle school and in high school were the years where I really started like getting digging more into this kind of music, and it was going to like stores that had like media play here, and I would go like peruse all the CDs, and I would find like albums with really cool artwork, like Children of Bodom's,
Mm.
like Follow the Reaper. I was like, this looks cool, and then you put it on, and it's mind blowing. So, and then well, what did we have back then? Like LimeWire and shit.
Yeah, because
So, things like that.
just ripping and infecting computers all over the country.
Oh yeah,
Parents were
yeah,
so happy about that.
yeah. Just going to shows. One of my favorite gigs I ever went to was I think 2002 or one or something like that. It was Bodum opening, then Hypocrisy, Nevermore, and Dimmu Borgir, which
Mm.
was such a stacked fucking bill, especially for all of those bands at the times. They released some of their best
I
records.
know, but and at the time, no one really knew it. And like looking
Yeah,
back
yeah,
20
yeah.
years later, like holy fuck, that's the best thing
Yeah.
about like looking. That's not the best thing, but some of the things like show flyers you'll see, you know, in metal or hardcore or all adjacent, heavy music genres, you'll see those bills where it's like six bands that you're like, oh my god, they could like sell out 1,000 seats, 1,000 seat venues, thousands of seats venues now. If that tour came, like even some of the early Ozfest stuff, like Jesus, compared to festivals that are going on now, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, those things were so stacked. And sometimes I reminisce of how good we had it without knowing it, because like you said, that show was so stacked too.
It was a lot of word of mouth, and just like even back then you'd see some really huge dude with a lot of patches and you'd be like, oh, that patch looks cool, and then you go home and you check it out and be like, oh, he's got good taste in music. So it's like stuff like that, it's but now you can just like do a Google search and find a blog with like
Yep.
exactly what you're looking for. Oh, and Spotify. I mean, I've never really used Spotify, but I know like you can just it'll send you to like similar artists, and you can find so much shit that way.
It's a
Um,
it's a love hate relationship with that with streaming services, and I know that we post a lot about like streaming service stuff and what goes on behind the scene, but and I know like they get a lot of hate, but I've been subscribed to Spotify for like half a decade or something like that or more now. You know what I mean? And like that, I don't know if I have a love hate relationship. I don't think I understand what goes on in the back end to make everything work and to make all of the systems and yada 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 work. So I don't know exactly how much money is flying around to people's pockets or to the artists or whatever. But I know from like just me, my personal use, like I have found, like you said, so much. So I've been introduced to so many things through that app, and like now it just keeps getting better and better. Like there's this algorithmic DJ feature that will, take what you've listened to and be like, hey, here are some other things in your that wheelhouse that you may like. And they were doing that previously. Like if you were listening to certain genres or certain groups of genres, they would throw them together in like a daily mix, right? So you would have like multiple daily mixes, which could be rap, rock, heavy metal, instrumental, electronic, whatever, and they would just kind of like showcase a bunch of music within that genre, which was cool. And the DJ feature, I think, is more intimate, more more
Rhythmic.
algorithmic, whatever you fucking want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I can't not use it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, like, I'll happily pay for, multiple people to use it. I have a family plan, so I give it out to people sometimes. But, yeah, I
don't
mean,
blame you for it, dude. Honestly, like
it's great.
my friend uses it all the time, and we're huge fans of Leprous.
Yeah, for sure.
At least me, like I got into the Bilateral album like real heavy about 10 years ago, and he would throw that on his Spotify, and one day he was like, "Oh, look, dude, I found like 14 bands that are almost just as good that nobody's ever heard of."
Exactly.
I was like,
Exactly.
"Show me right now."
Yeah. Dude, Leverus, that band, that's a band that I was stumbling through YouTube drum covers one day, like years ago, and what is it, Jard? What's his name? The drummer for
Bard.
that? Yeah.
Kolstad,
Dude,
yeah.
that guy is fucking insane.
He is. He's nuts.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, I may not like the vocals all the time in that band or anything like that, but I'll fucking listen to it because I know whatever he's playing is like robotic arm man. He's so crazy.
And he's super unique. He fucking hits like a monster too. And what's really cool about that band, and my history might be a little bit off, but from what I remember, most of those guys were the backing band for Isan Live before they started Leprous.
That kind of makes sense.
I think the singer is like his brother-in-law or some shit like that. So, but
and those vocals, I'm not gonna shit on those vocals. It works for whatever is going on for that band. It works, and like I'll fucking sing along. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm not singing along.
It's hard to because he hits some notes which are almost unreachable for us regular people.
I'm not saying I'm doing it in key. I'm singing along though.
Yeah, no, I definitely hum along to a lot of that shit. But yeah, no, especially Bilateral and The Congregation were two records that were just monumental. I didn't even know people were writing music like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Europe's got a whole different thing going on over there. Like, metal did get big in the early in the 80s and early 90s here, like following like the grunge, or not following the grunge, but like right before grunge started coming in, like you would see like all this like wacky hair metal, which then started spawning like extreme, quote unquote, extreme metal in the underground, and you started seeing like Cannibal Corpse in movies with like Pet Detective and Ace Ventura and shit, and they're getting like they're getting known
for
stuff.
My favorites.
Yeah, I talked to Alex about that, and I was like, are you guys still friends? And they're like, we weren't really friends. And I was like, oh, well, that sucks.
Oh, it's a bummer, dude. That sucked. Because I was such a huge Jim Carrey fan. Actually, when we were the night before we were in Jacksonville, we had a green room that had a TV with a VCR, and we were watching Ace Ventura before we went on stage.
It's good stuff.
Was fucking awesome.
Like a glove.
Yeah,
but
it was that one.
God, what the fuck was I talking about? We were talking about Leprous, but then we got.
You were talking about how like the contrast in Europe.
Oh yeah. I feel like there's way more mainstream metal stuff going on in Europe, whether it's like a Napalm record. Because I mean, I get flooded with emails about bands signed bands, right? Not on top of like underground bands, but like signed bands. Like Napalm Records has like so many artists, or Nuclear Black has so many artists where it's like very palatable metal, like female fronted metal that is on the radio all over, or they have like Viking metal or pirate metal. There's so many different versions of metal going on over in Europe that can't sustain themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's wild that it's not the same here in the States. You know what I mean?
No, it's definitely a different dynamic over there. I feel like they appreciate their music in a different way.
I can see that.
Than we do here. You know what I mean? From what it seems like, at least from across the ocean, it seems like it's much more of an integral part of the fans' lives over there. Like all the festival. Plus, Europe is so condensed, and like there's festivals all over the place.
Right.
You can take a train to go see like one of the sickest lineups ever.
Luckily,
Where here it's,
we're starting to get those 4 day like super stacked festivals that are in the Euro style. Like,
but it's still, I mean, it's here, it's kind of few and far between, and then you have to make a whole fucking trip out of it.
yep.
At least for me, anyway. I'm
You know,
old, so it's like,
you're not the only one. I've done it. I do it all the time. Every year we trek to a couple of them, and I'm like, fuck, these 4 days are like sometimes brutal because we're there for most of the
yeah,
day too. You know, like we're covering a lot of stuff and we're walking around a lot more than the average person. And it's like doing Rockville in the middle of May in Florida outside for 4 days is like, fuck.
but I feel like in Europe, they definitely get to see bands perform that also will never come to the States
Right.
for whatever reason, you know, and it's we're definitely missing out on that a lot here. Um, I know like Emperor's doing some shows. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they'll do them here, but it would be dope to like
Yeah.
see them perform again.
Maybe some of our bigger metal bands should be like, we're not going over there until you guys come over here. But who
I
knows?
don't think that's a card they
Yeah,
can play.
they can't. They can't. They can't. Because again, that's like a big market. That's such a big market over there. You know, for metal, it's crazy, which is good. Um,
Yeah.
so, what is in the future for Fires in the Dark? I'm sorry, Fires in the Distance.
It's close enough.
Fires do go in the dark though too. You know, you need some light.
Yeah.
But so fire. What is
Yeah.
in the next couple of years? So you just had the album last April or March, right? You released
April,
the
yeah.
album.
April, and we just got done with the tour for this year in October. And right now, I'm just writing. I have one track down, and I'm just gonna try to make the most out of just being home. I'm getting settled into my new job, and just try to ride the creative wave as much as I can because you know I've definitely hit some lengthy blocks before. So while it's there, I'm gonna take advantage of it. So and until May, we're just you know just kind of chilling. I'm gonna be focusing on the writing aspect of things. I think the other guys are just you know just focusing on their lives and stuff. And in May, we're gonna try to make something out of that week in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
See what we can do there. So yeah, it's just writing mode, man.
Cool. What is your typical, like your ideal, not typical, what is your ideal album cycle? Because you had the pandemic release, which is the first album, and then you had
Yeah.
your other one in 2023, early 2023 this year. So,
Pandemic. It almost sounds like a South Park episode.
right? Well, that's kind of what it
The
is, guys.
pandemic
I
album.
mean, it is a pandemic album.
Yeah. I would say like 2.5 years, but it's hard to. I try not to, you know, quantify it with time because I I I can't force anything, and if it's not there, it's not there. Luckily, like you know, Prosthetic's been very kind with not putting a time limit on, you know, when I have to give them something. They're very supportive when it comes to just, you know, taking whatever amount of time that I need to be as creative as I can. So I don't really feel the pressure from them, which is a big, you know, relieving factor. But usually it takes about maybe a year and a half, 2 years, if I really can focus on something without any breaks. And I'm good with like an hour's worth of time. I
Mm.
really try not to go over that. A little bit under is fine too. Um, and after that, it's just you know banging it out in the studio. And unfortunately, waiting for vinyls. That's the longest aspect of putting out an album nowadays.
Well, hey,
So
it'll get better and better as time gets away from the pandemic. You mean, you know, that was a big
yeah.
problem for that year too. Those couple of years.
Well, Adele kind of made it hard for everybody with the vinyls.
Yeah. Yeah, those albums. I mean, there's so many of those albums just sitting around collecting dust on in trash cans probably somewhere. You know, Taylor Swift and her. That is crazy, crazy amounts of vinyl being pressed. But like, you know, your band's just trying to press a couple hundred here or a couple thousand.
Yeah,
Here,
yeah.
you know, what I mean, it's like, come on, man. You don't need
Just
fucking
trying to get
100,000.
scraps of the material.
That's why. Yeah, that's why all these metal albums are in like splatter colors. There's not enough, you know, enough vinyl going around. We got to use all these bits and pieces from everywhere. But
And tapes are, I mean, cassettes are making a big comeback too. Like almost
yep.
every show that I go to, somebody has because the cassettes for sale.
Yeah, we Lambgoat Records is a thing again, and we kind of put out 18 Visions, the Orange County metalcore band from back in the day, is still going strong. They just put out their newest EP last month, Purgatorio, and we helped them put out like variants. We put out the CD as well as the cassette tape. So like, yeah, that was something that we've noticed too, is cassettes are definitely coming back in full, which is weird because like I was talking to my buddy and he was like, I'm not buying a tape player. I was like, no one's listening to tapes. I don't think anyone's really listening to tapes. That's not the ideal way.
Nostalgia factor thing.
Yeah, that's not the ideal way to ingest the music.
So many, especially metal fans, like so many of them are audiophiles, so that's why they love the vinyl. And I totally get that. There's a vast difference between obviously a CD and a vinyl record.
Is there, Yegor?
Nope.
Is there?
Yeah, I think so. I actually have to invest in a record player myself just to test it out. And it's true.
I don't know about all that. I don't know. I'm on the aspect of like CD is king, and I have vinyl and a really good record player. But I'm like, dude,
CD is the most accessible thing. That's why it's king. But the cassette, I think is definitely a nostalgia thing. I'm even considering buying another Walkman but then again, it's just gonna collect dust, like you said. Like I'm not gonna use it because I'm not gonna like
walk around the neighborhood.
Use it for the sound quality.
No,
it's not gonna fit in my pockets. It's gonna stick out.
Yeah. No, we literally were talking about buying Walkmans just for, what I mean. He was like, I don't want to buy a tape, and I go, I don't buy tapes either. But I mean, we put the tape out, so it's fucking like a cool. It's a cool thing for us, right? But he's like, fuck, I guess I need a Walkman, and I just died laughing. And but again, that might go with like how metal sounded back in the day. Those guys were like, hell yeah.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
Tapes rock, dude, but they're just the worst audio ever.
Somebody loves it.
Yeah, not me. I do have a couple, but I'm not listening to them, you know what I mean? All right, Yegor, it was a great time chatting with you for this. I'm glad we finally got it after a couple of months of going back and forth. And I'm going to hop off here and listen to The Sky is Red by Leprous for 5 times in a row, maybe. I may even watch the video of Homeboy just playing the drums. That video is so crazy because he has another guy join him.
Yeah, they got the 2 drummers. It's so sick.
Fucking nuts, dude. But all right. I'll let you go. I got a whole day.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. And anytime, let me know. I'll come on and chat with you.
Yeah. Let me know when you guys are coming around again. Obviously, it's not too and far. It's few and far between. But let me know. I'd love to come catch you guys live again. It was a great time.
Yeah, man. We'll keep in touch. You'll have a good day.
Take it easy, man.